And what they have found is the myth rather than the norm. And what explains it? Government has an obvious interest in saying this is the norm so that they can guide policy accordingly and punish people for not attaining the supposed norm.
South Africa's system of black economic empowerment is deeply flawed. Can this system be fixed, or must it be replaced altogether? Well, in this extract from a longer conversation on my podcast, Solutions with David Ansara, I spoke with Anthea Jeffery, the head of policy research at the Institute of Race Relations, to discuss why BEE continues to gain support from the business community in South Africa, and also what alternative policy approaches there might be to the current system. Why do you think BEE has been supported so actively by the business community in South Africa?
Well, I expect it's really because it seems very difficult to oppose something which the government says is the crucial means of providing redress. I think given our past, there's obviously a great need for redress, and there's obviously a great need for many more people to be drawn into the economy. One wants to see that. And perhaps there hasn't been given enough thought, has not been given to an alternative, because business, I think, I'm sure, is well aware of all the difficulties with BEE, all the inefficiencies that it generates, the high costs of having to meet racial quotas in employment, particularly if those become mandatory under the bill that's now being pushed through Parliament. The high cost of doing BEE deals, where I think it was Professor William Gamede said at the end of December 2019 that R1 trillion had not been allocated to BEE deals. It's an enormous amount of money. And we've had indicators for many years from finance ministers and the National Treasury that there's an enormous wastage in the preferential procurement sphere in the public sector. And Pravin Gordhan, when he was first appointed finance minister in 2009, said, the government is paying too much for everything, 40 million rand for a school that should cost 15 million. That's indicating that it's not just a 10 or 20% markup that's happening for BEE. It's more than 100% markup. And this is enormously wasteful. I'm sure the private sector, when it engages in preferential procurement, tries to avoid that kind of waste. But there is nevertheless a sense that you can't just pick the people you want to contract with on the basis of price, efficiency, and capacity to deliver. And the moment you bring in other criteria, race in particular, it's a new element, and it may not work as well as the established ones. So why doesn't business oppose it? I think it's very difficult to go out on a limb and criticize it openly. I think the media has also been very supportive of what the government has said. You haven't had much critical coverage of whether employment equity and BEE are really working. Ironically, some of the strongest criticism has come from the South African Communist Party, which has said that BEE is the reason for our rising inequality, and have highlighted this distinction between the few who do very well and the great majority who remain unemployed. So perhaps business also needs to have a greater awareness of what the alternative might be. Because if there's an alternative, it becomes easier to say, let's push towards a different idea. Just to say we don't like BEE is likely to be taken quite badly by the government. We've seen how the DA, for example, has been castigated for not caring sufficiently about the Black poor, which is not true. What the DA is also trying to say is there's a better means of helping the Black poor, and doesn't lie in BEE. I'm sure business doesn't want to attract that kind of negative coverage. But if business could say, we think there's a better way, and we would like to put our resources and our capacities behind that better way, and we would like to see a real upsurge in growth, investment, employment, prosperity, and at the same time, we'd like to do whatever we can to help that shift of resources down to the grassroots, make sure that the vouchers are really working for the poor, to meet their needs for education, housing, healthcare. And there are many things that business could do in that sphere. To earn extra EED points, you could top up vouchers for the poorest in rural areas. You could help develop more effective ways of using technology to improve teaching. Any number of things where business already has an established expertise and could help improve the quality overall. But I think there needs to be an alternative, or it's a very difficult thing to do to oppose BEE, given how heavily invested the government has been in it.
Enjoying this analysis? Click here to sign up for our 30-day free trial for more content from the CIA.
Anthea, you've outlined some of the problems with the current system of BEE, but many people say, well, BEE hasn't worked for various reasons. We just haven't done BEE in the right way. And if we tweak the system, if we double down on this policy, we'll have outcomes that are more aligned with our expectations. What do you think about that? Can BEE be fixed?
I think it absolutely can't be. And one of the key reasons is that it's chasing an impossible goal. It's supposed to be achieving the norm, as it's called, of demographic representativity. And this is the idea that Black, white, colored Indian people would, in the absence of racism, fan out into the economy, into business, into jobs, and exactly in accordance with their share of the overall population. But that's not a norm. If it were a norm, you would find it present in many heterogeneous societies. In fact, it's a myth in every heterogeneous society. And this has been carefully explored by Thomas Sowell, one of the most renowned economists in the US, and other scholars in the US as well, who've really done a very careful study of this. And what they have found is the myth rather than the norm. And what explains it? Government has an obvious interest in saying this is the norm so that they can guide policy accordingly and punish people for not attaining the supposed norm. But the reality of the myth is founded in the fact that everybody is different. We aren't all blank slates, and we're not all sort of fungible little units that can be slotted here and slotted there and slotted anywhere else. In fact, all individuals differ in their interests, in their values, their experiences, their skills, and in a whole number of variables which actually have an impact on the sorts of jobs they're likely to do, and with what level of success. And so you need to recognize that the goal is an impossible goal for any country in the world. It's particularly difficult in South Africa because of the age and skills profile here, if I could just explain. And if we take the Employment Equity Act, that is asking business and the public service to aspire to demographic representativity. That at the end of the day, because African people make up 79% of the economically active population, they should also make up 79% of the workforce at every level, from the most senior down to the most junior. But the economically active population, of course, includes all people between the ages of 15 and 64 who either work or would like to work, even though they've never had the chance to do so. So using the economically active population as the kind of benchmark is unrealistic, particularly because we have a very young population. Roughly half of South Africans are under the age of 25. And people in that sort of age group can't possibly be eligible for senior posts or professional posts. So we could say, well, anybody over the age of 35 is more geared to middle or senior management. And let's look at that group, 35 to 64. And we find that Black people make up 46% of that group. So 46% would be a more tangible, more reachable objective than 79%. But even that is too high, because very often you do need degrees. They're either advisable or they're necessary for middle and senior management jobs. And if we look at the Black population with degrees, there's only 5% who are in that category because of our history. And many of them are fairly recent graduates who haven't had the opportunity to develop all the years of experience on the job, which are needed for senior posts. So we've set a thoroughly unrealistic target. In the public service, it's almost being met. And that is part of the reason why efficiency in the public service is so diminished. Now the government is looking through the Employment Equity Amendment Bill for the private sector also to meet that kind of target, but we don't have the age and the skills profile that allows it. And the more that business is pushed into appointing people to senior levels before they're ready for those positions, because no matter what your skin color, fundamentally you need experience and knowledge to be able to do a job. then there is likely to be a diminution in efficiency and competitiveness within the private sector, which business, of course, can't sustain, because business does not have regular injections of taxpayers' money, irrespective of their performance. Business has to be competitive within the country and very often abroad. So it's a major problem that we're trying to reach this impossible goal. And no matter how much we tighten up the laws, as the government is now trying to do it, it's not going to change the age and skills profile. That can't be changed overnight. It can change gradually over time, but we can't expect to have a very quick change and still have efficiency in in the private sector. And we can see all the risks of what happens if you try to go too fast from the experience of the public service.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this discussion, why don't you head on over to my other channel where you can continue watching the rest of the discussion. I've linked to that interview here. Also, please remember, give this video a like and subscribe to the CRA channel. And until next time, take care.